Hi everyone, we're going to get started with Chapter 2, Module 2 for Microsoft Excel. In this particular chapter we're going to be working with formulas and functions. And so some of the objectives that we're going to cover in this lesson is working with a complex formula. We're going to be inserting functions and typing in, looking at the different types of functions. We're going to be also working with some of our cell entries in terms of copying and moving them. And we're also going to discuss relative and absolute references, cell references. We'll then be copying formulas with a cell reference and a relative cell reference, as well as copying a formula with an absolute cell reference. And then we're going to be using a function called the round function, where it rounds to a value. So as you can tell, I am currently in SAM, so I need to go ahead and get our start file. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the exams and the training, and we're going to be working with the SAM Excel textbook project, Excel 2 for textbooks. I'm going to go ahead and click on that link. I'll hit the start button. Remember, we need to download the file, but in order for us to save this and upload it to SAM, we need to copy the file name, and we'll go ahead and then download the file. I have mine configured to automatically open up in Microsoft Excel. So once the application opens, we'll go ahead and do a file and a save as. I always like to save my documents that I'm working on to my desktop, so I'm going to scroll, and under the favorites I'm going to select desktop. Under the file name, I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to replace it with the file name that I pasted that SAM requires that I name my file. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that and go ahead and save, and we can get started. All right, so we take a look at our worksheet here. We have the tour expenses by quarter, and this is for the fiscal year 2017, and we're working with the Reason to Go company, and here we want to analyze our tour expenses for the current year. And so we've been asked to prepare a worksheet that will summarize our data, our expense data, and then include some statistical analysis. All right, so we're going to get started. And so the first thing we're going to do is create a complex formula. And we define a complex formula as one that uses more than one arithmetic operator. So for example, you might need to create a formula that uses addition and multiplication. So in that case, this is considered a complex formula. And so if a formula contains more than one arithmetic operator, Excel uses the standard order of precedence, which may be familiar, the order of operations. You may remember learning in elementary school the phrase, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally," where the P is parentheses, E is exponents, M for multiplication, D for division, A for addition, and then S for subtraction. And so we follow that order of precedence when we are creating our formulas, when we need to create them, if there isn't a built-in function for such, if that is the case. So as we've gotten started, we have our file open here. We've saved our file. And the first thing that we're going to do is we want to select the range B4 through B11. So let me click in cell B4 through B11. And on that quick analysis tool, this is a little tool that pops up that appears below our selection. We want to activate the totals tab, and we want to sum this column. So we'll go ahead and choose the auto sum button. And now we can then click in cell B12, and we can now copy that formula over for quarters 2, 3, and 4. And I believe we're going to go to E12. All right, so now if I look in cell C12, I see a formula that calculates the quarter 2 expenses. I now want to click into cell B14 And I'm going to create a formula here, so I need to always remember we always begin a formula with the equal sign. And I'm creating a two-part formula because what I want to calculate is a 20% increase, a what-if type of analysis of a 20% rise. What would that actually be? Okay, so in the first part of our formula, we're going to be inserting a reference to the cell that contains our total expenses for quarter 1, right? So I click in cell B14, and this value here is going to be equal to the contents of B12, and then we're going to add that. That's the first part. Now we want to add that to B12, and we're going to multiply that. We use the asterisk for multiplication by 20%, and we illustrate 20% in decimals by 0.2. So the second part of my formula adds a 20% increase, which is that B12 multiplied by 0.2. All right, and we want to put this in brackets. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in brackets. So it's first going to multiply this value, and then it's going to add on the actual total. So I'll come up to my enter key on my formula bar, and the result is $42,749.58. I'm going to hit the tab button. I'm now going to click in cell C12, and again I'll begin equals, and I will type in C12 plus C12 times 0.2. Right, and we get 42,323.1712. Now you notice that time I did not put the brackets around it, and that was okay. All right, it knows to do the multiplication first. Okay, remember it's following the order of precedence. We could have put it in brackets. We didn't need to. I did put it in brackets, but it knows because of the order of precedence that we do multiplication before we do any addition. All right, so we can actually take our fill handle and drag that across for quarters 3 and quarter 4. All right, so we completed our first skill. The next thing we want to do is we're going to insert a function. Now, functions are predefined worksheet formulas, and they enable us to perform some complex calculations. We can we can use the insert function button, and that's going to be on the formula bar. Actually, there's the formulas tab, and there's the insert function right over here as well. Depending upon the formula, it may exist over in the editing group under the auto sum. So it really depends on what type of function that we're going to be inserting to maybe determine where we want to go and do to get that actual function. So we're going to calculate the average. All right, so we're going to click in cell B15, and we're going to use the insert function on the formula bar. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that button. Notice it automatically places an equal sign in my formula and opens up an insert function dialog box. So in this dialog box, we're going to specify the function that we want to use by clicking on it in that select a function list. So if I look down at this list, I can find that notice the categories most recently used. And the function that we would like to select from this list is going to be average. So we click the average in the select a function list, and you can notice it gives you information about the appearance under that. Right below it, it gives us a little description of what this function does for us. We're going to say OK, and now we need to determine what the arguments are going to be. So we know that the the average, number 1, we are currently in our cell B14. It's thinking that we want this number above us. But in fact, we want to select the range. We need to determine what the range is going to be. So we hit the... Alright, so we're going to click this collapse button, and that closes the arguments so we can see more of our worksheet. And we're going to come in on our worksheet and we're going to select the range B4 through B11, because that's the range that we want to find the average of in our worksheet. We can expand, open that up, and then we say OK. And what it does is it adds, we know what the average does. It takes the number of, it adds all of the numbers that we want and then divides by the number of entries that we have there. All right, so we've entered in for this particular average. We're going to see another place where we can actually find the average function. So if I click in cell C15, if we go up on the home ribbon in our editing group under auto sum, we're also going to see this function. All right, it's a common function, and that's why it's very visible to us. And so when I click on the average this time, it finds the value above us. And that's not the correct value. So what we did then do is we can just simply click and draw and drag. So I'm just drawing a box around the values that I want to include to find the average for quarter 2. And I will go up to my formula bar and hit the Enter key. Next, we want to select our fill handle. And so we learned in cell B15 by inserting the average using the insert function on our formula bar. And then in cell C15, we learned how to insert the average function by using the auto sum option of the home ribbon in the editing group. And so we can simply just drag that function across, and it will calculate the averages for the 3rd and the 4th quarter. All right, so that's our skill for inserting a function. Next, we're going to type a function. All right, so this is a different way that we can insert functions into a worksheet. So this time, we're actually going to click in cell B16, and we're manually going to type it in. So we're going to hit the equal sign, and I'm going to type in M. And notice as I type in M, I get a list of functions appear. I get a little autocomplete list. And I'm looking for the function to find the maximum number within a range. So that function is called max. I can actually see it there. It's the second option. But if I type in A, notice my list gets smaller. I click the X, it gets even smaller again, and now it's at the top. And so I want that first function that is listed there. And we can even see that description. It tells us it's going to return the largest value in the set of values. It ignores logical values in text. All right, this is the value that we want. So I just double clicked on it, and now I need to select the range. So the range that I want this to look into is B4 through B11. The same range that I used to calculate my 20% increase and my average. And then I'll select my range, come up to the formula bar, and hit the Enter key. We're going to try this now using the minimum. So again, we begin with an equals. I type in an equals. I type in M. Again, notice all the M's come up. I narrow it down by typing in an I. And then I know it's MIN. That's the function. I'll go ahead and double click on it. I need to specify the range. So I'm going to come up to the quarter 1, select the range B4 through B11, and on my formula bar I'm going to hit the check mark. The last thing I want to do is select the range B16 and B17, and I'm going to copy these formulas for quarters 2, 3, and 4. So I will simply drag these across. now we want to work with copying and moving some cell entries. There are 3 ways that we can copy or move cells and ranges from one location to another, and that is by using the cut, copy, and paste buttons on the Home tab on the ribbon, and the fill handle in the lower right corner of the active cell or range. It's another way, or we can use the drag and drop feature. So we're going to practice each of these options. First thing I want to do is select the range B3 to E3. So I go to B3, whoops, here we go, B3 to E3. I have that range selected. I'm going to go up to my clipboard and I'm going to select copy. I hit the copy button. And I want to open up my launcher. So I'm going to click on this option here, and it's going to open up a pane on the left-hand side, and I can see what is being copied right here. So this is the Office clipboard. This actually opens in that clipboard task pane. And when we copy or cut an item, it's cut or copied both to the clipboard that is provided by Windows to the Office clipboard. All right, so unlike the Windows clipboard, which will only hold one item at a time, the Office clipboard will allow us to hold up to 24 items of the most recently cut or copied items from any program. So you might actually see some more items in here. We're going to click in cell B19. Let me scroll down here. I'm going to click in cell B19, and I'm going to click the paste button on the, come up to my home ribbon, and in the clipboard group I'm going to choose paste, and now it pastes the contents to those cells. It pastes it into that range. All right, so now we realize that we actually pasted in the wrong location. So I'm going to go ahead now and hit the delete button on my keyboard. And now actually I want this to appear in cells B20. So I'll go ahead, and then this time I'm going to come over to my Office clipboard, and I'm going to click in the clipboard area to insert what I had pasted to my clipboard into my worksheet. I can now close out my clipboard, and I'm now going to click in cell A14. They're going to show us another way that we can copy. Right, so now this time I'm going to click in cell A14. I'm going to hold down the control button on my keyboard, so I'm holding down the control button, and I'm going to point to any edge of my cell until my pointer turns into, let's see, we want the pointer to turn into that's our traditional pointer, but we want the pointer to turn into an arrow with a plus. Now I'm holding down my mouse in order for that to happen, okay? So I'm selected A14, I'm holding down my control button, and now I want to drag this to A21. And I release. So what I've done is I just copied the contents of that cell and pasted it to, I did a drag and drop into cell A21. I now want to click to the right of the 2 in my formula bar. So I'm coming up to my formula bar. I want to click to the right of the number 2, and I'm going to hit my backspace. And I want to now type 3, because now what we want to calculate is a 30% increase. And so I will hit the enter on my keyboard, or I can hit the enter on my formula board. Either way works. I now want to click in cell B21, and in cell B21 I want to calculate a 30% increase for the expenses. So I'm going to again begin with my equal sign. I will click in cell B12. This time I'm going to multiply. So I use my asterisk. Multiply by 1.3. So my new formula is going to calculate a 30% increase of the expense for quarter 1. I'm using a different method from what we used before, all right? So what we're doing is we're multiplying by 1.3, and this is going to return the amount that is 130% of the original amount, or a 30% increase, all right? So I'll come up and I will enter that value. And let's go ahead and save our changes. We haven't saved in quite a while. Now we want to talk about absolute references and relative cell references. So as we work in Excel, you might want to reuse formulas in different parts of a worksheet to reduce the amount of data that you have to retype. So you may want to include a what-if analysis in a part of a worksheet that's going to show some sales projections if perhaps there's a sales increase by 10, and to include another analysis in another part of a worksheet showing projections as if the sale was increased by 50%. And so we can copy these formulas from one section to another by simply changing the 1 to a 5. But when we copy formulas, it's important to make sure that they refer to the correct cells. And so because of this, we need to understand the difference between a relative and an absolute reference. We use relative and absolute references for certain conditions. All right, so we use a relative reference when we want to preserve the relationship to the formula location. When we create a formula that references another cell, Excel normally doesn't record the exact cell address for the cell being referenced in the formula. Instead, it looks at the relationship that cell has to the cell containing the formula. For example, in cell F5, let's see, does this, in cell, we don't have a formula in here, but we should put a formula in here that's going to total our, yes, so in cell F5, we are going to calculate and use a relative reference to calculate our totals. And we're going to place a formula in here that is going to be the sum of the range of B5 through E5. And so when Excel retrieves the values to calculate the formula, it actually looks for the 4 cells to the left of the formula, which in this case is B5 through E5. So this way, if we copy the cells to a new location, such as F6, the results are going to reflect the new formula location and automatically retrieve the values in cells B6, C6, D6, and E6. So these are referred to as relative cell references because Excel is recording the input cells in relation to or relative to the formula cell. All right, so this is where the F4 is where the formula is going to reside, and these are relative to where the formula is. When we use an absolute cell reference, we want to preserve the exact cell address in a formula. So if we want to always reference one cell, then we refer to that as an absolute reference. We create an absolute cell reference by placing a $sign in front of both the column letter and the row number of the cell address. We can either type that in, or we can use the function key F4, and that will automatically add the $signs in for us. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So we are going to copy formulas first with a relative cell reference, and then we're going to copy formulas with an absolute cell reference. In cell B21, let's go to cell B21. So in cell B21, we're going to click our copy button. And that's going to go to the clipboard group on our Home tab. That's actually, we are using the copy function from here. We're going to click in cell C21. And we're going to go up to the clipboard and we're going to choose the paste button. And it pastes that formula is copied into C21. And we see that new result of 45,850, and there's a decimal with 6.88 that appears. And so if we notice in the formula bar that the cell references have changed so that C12 is referenced instead of B12. So this is what we're referring to. We copied this formula from B21 and we pasted it into C21. The formula in cell B21 referenced B12, but when we pasted that formula into cell C21, it referenced the value in column C. We're going to use that fill handle and we're going to drag that formula across. A formula similar to the ones in cell C21 now appear in D21 and in E21. After we use that fill handle to copy the contents, the autofill option button appears, and there's our autofill options. That button appears, and we can use that autofill option button to fill cells with specific elements of the copied cells if we so wish to. Let's click in cell F4. We're now clicking in cell F4. This time we're going to select the Auto Sum button and I choose the Auto Sum button, and then I'm going to come to my formula bar. Notice that it wants to add we got B4 plus C4, D4, and E4. We're going to add that range. Go ahead and say enter. And on my clipboard group, I want to choose the copy button. And I'm now going to select the range F5 through F6. And I'll come to my clipboard group and again choose paste. After we click our paste button again, we see those paste options appear, and these will appear adjacent to our selected range. And again, we can use the paste options list to paste only specific elements, so we see all the different options that we have. And we don't need to modify anything at this point. I want to hit the escape button, and that will close my paste options list, or just clicking on it again will do that. Escape will also stop the copying from having that moving border around our total there. I want to select the range F6 through F11. F6 through F11, and I'm going to select the fill down button from the editing group. So if I go to my editing group, there's an option that says fill. I'm going to say fill down. So the formula containing that relative reference, those relative references, they're copied to each cell. So they just showed you several ways that we can calculate and copy and work with relative references. Next, we're going to copy formulas with an absolute cell reference. And when we remember, when we're copying cells, we might want more, one or more cell reference in a formula to remain unchanged. All right, and this is where we apply a cell reference, an absolute cell reference. I want to click in cell G1, and I'm going to type in the word change, and I'm going to hit the enter key, and I'm going to type in 1.1 in cell G2, and then in cell H3 I'm going to type in what if and a question mark. and hit the Enter key. And in H4, I'm going to type in equals, I'm going to click in cell F4, and I want to multiply, so I'll use my asterisk, by the contents of G2. And I will hit the Enter key on my keyboard. And our result is 28,690 and 10 cents, 0.1. We see that appear in cell H4. This value represents the total annual expense for Australia if there is a 10% increase. And so we want to perform a what-if analysis for all the other tour countries. So we're going to see what happens if we drag this formula down through the remaining as we normally do. We usually will create a formula and then we can use our fill handle, and watch what happens if I fill this down through the other countries. The resulting values in that range were all zeros. This is not the result that we want because we used a relative cell reference, a relative cell address in cell H4, and then we copied that formula and we adjusted it so that the formula in cell H5 is equal to, let's look at cell H5. H5 is equal to F5 and multiplied by G3. Because there's no value in cell G3, the result is 0, which in this case is an error. So we need to use an absolute reference in the formula to keep the formula from adjusting itself. This way it's always going to reference G2. Let's click back in cell H4 and we're going to select the F2 button, and that brings us into an editing mode. My cursor is blinking next to the G2, which is the referencing of 1.1, that 10% increase. I'm going to go ahead and hit the F4 button on my keyboard. When we choose the F4 button, when we press F4, dollar signs are inserted into our cell reference, making it an absolute cell reference. I'm going to then go over to my formula bar and hit the Enter key. And now when I use that fill handle down, it's going to reference the totals for each country and multiply it by the change for the value that is in cell G3. So if I click in each of these, I can see F3, F5 multiplied by G2, F6 multiplied by G2. So by making that reference, that initial reference, an absolute reference, we will always be referencing the value in that one cell. Now if I click in cell G2 and I change the value of 1.1 to 1.2, we now see our what-if scenario. Now we see that change to reflect a 20% increase. The last skill that we learn in this lab is using the round a value with a function. So the more we explore the features and the tools in Excel, the more ways that you find to simplify your work and convey information more efficiently. So we are going to now click in cell B14. And we want to click to the right of the equal sign up in our formula bar. And we're going to type in the word R and O, and what appears now are some formula, or functions rather, that we can insert into our formula because we would like to round this value. So the autocomplete is displaying a list of functions that are beginning with R and O beneath our formula bar. We're going to go ahead and double click the word round. So that new function and an opening parenthesis are added to our formula. We're going to go to the end after the 2, and we're going to choose, type in a comma, and then I'm going to type in 0. And then I'm going to choose the Enter key on my keyboard. And we have a problem with our formula, so let me see what this is about. Alright, so we received an error, so what we need to do is we need to actually go in and remove the bracket that we have inside here. And so we added a comma after the 2, we inserted a 0 and then an end bracket. And now when we select the Enter key, it now rounds that value to the nearest 0, and that's what we were asking it to do by rounding it. So that comma separates the arguments within our formula, and the 0 indicates that we don't want any decimal places to appear in our calculated values. We're going to go ahead and drag that fill handle from cell B14 to E14. And so that cell in B14 is then copied to that range C14 to E14. All the values are rounded to display no decimal places. We're going to scroll down to cell row A25. And so we can see A25 is visible. And in cell A25, you are going to type in your name. Alright, so we are done working on this particular module. We'll go ahead, save those changes, and we can submit this to the SAM grader to be graded.